Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Strand. My name is Nicholas, and I help direct our event programming. For a little bit of history, the Strand was founded in 1927 by the Bass family over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled as big box stores such as Amazon and ebooks took hold. After almost 91 years, Strand is the sole survivor, still run by the Bass family, and still housing new and used books. Applause. Yes. Well-deserved applause, including some in this room. Fun tidbit from the 15th century. That's pretty cool. Okay, tonight I'm excited to welcome author, actor, and director Amber Tamblyn for the launch of her new book, Era of Ignition, Coming of Age in a Time of Rage and Revolution. Amber has been nominated for an Emmy, Golden Globe, and Independent Spirit Award for her work in television and film, including Joan of Arcadia and Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Most recently, she wrote and directed the feature film, Paint It Black. She's the author of 3 books of poetry, including the critically acclaimed bestseller, Dark Sparkler, and a novel, Any Man, as well as a contributing writer for the New York Times. Joining Amber in conversation tonight is National Leader for Women's Rights, Cecile Richards. Cecile's myriad endeavors as a national leader for women's rights include a 12-year seat as president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, and being the author of New York Times bestseller, Make Trouble. We're very lucky to have these 2 authors with us tonight. So please first join me in welcoming Amber to read some selections from the book, and later on, Cecile Richards to the Strand.
God. Hi, you guys. Wow, this is such a treat. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I'm going to read like 150 pages. So if you can just, take your feet out of your shoes. And I'm really nervous tonight because I have to tell you something off the bat. 3 of the most important women in my entire life are here, and they are my healers. One of them is my osteopath. Mary Bano is here, and also Vicky, my acupuncturist, and Lisa Love, my physical therapist. And they literally, no book you have read of mine that you love would not be written without their physical touch on my body. So I want to thank them. So I'm just going to read these 2 little short chapters, which I think sort of shows a little bit about what the book is about, but also gives some idea about the expression of the work and sort of who I am if you haven't heard me read before. The question all parents ask themselves is, what kind of world have I brought my child into? I wonder if my own mother ever felt that way about me. I recently texted her during a bout of depression and asked, Mom, when you were pregnant with me, did you ever think to yourself, what kind of world am I bringing this girl into? My mother responded by saying, no, we were delighted to have you. There was hope then, especially for environmental concerns, but now we have reached the fatal tipping point that many scientists warned us about. As a species, we have fouled the nest. Now it's about adapting and building supportive villages. We might get lucky and some brilliant team can invent a carbon capture technology, but we will be fine. Marlo, that's my daughter, will be fine. Many good years left to live. Take heart. And while I have no idea what survivalist malarkey that carbon capture technology was all about, my mother's a Southern California hippie, she believes in chemtrails, I did understand her and feel relief from her words. As a new mother to my daughter, Marlo, I have been no different in my fears. But I've started to focus like my mother focuses, less on the world I have brought my daughter into and more on the world I will be leaving for her, by fighting to change it. It is a test of true perseverance. After having Marlo, I was thrust from my own self-centered wallowing into a sort of permanent projectile optimism. As difficult as things are and as impossible as that sounds, I am not without what sometimes feels like supernatural hope, the sorcery of promise, the magic of making it so. I try to visualize the world's transformation and see my daughter as something budding from its abundance, not suffering in its stagnancy. Every quaking nerve, every rattled premonition, every fear for the future propels my indignation into action. And my daughter carries within her now that sparked gene. But while she is of my being, she does not belong to me. And her freedom from my physical body presents a terrifying fact most parents face. I cannot control her safety. There is ultimately nothing I can do to fully protect her from this world. So instead of worrying about that all the time, which I do, I aim to change the world around her instead. I know it's a wholly unreasonable desire, but it is the only choice I've got, that any of us have. The world I want to give her will be safe and fair and representative of all bodies, not just the ones that look like her own. It will be wild and riveting and full of tender wonder and sometimes failure. It will be intentioned and imperfect, but not imbalanced, and it will still be complicated, unfair at times, and disappointing. The world will be a ferocious verse sung into a universe of similar songs. It will be filled with more possibility than passivity, more empathy than sympathy. The world I want to give her will be a leap into the riot of her own imagination. I want her to see with as much desire as she longs to be seen, to listen to others with as much focus as she longs to be heard. I want her to never have to be afraid to be in a room alone with someone, whether for work or for love. The world I want to give her has no mirrors to bully her frame, no scales meant to shame her size, no culture nurtured to reject her voice. It will love her unabridged, and it will teach her to respect others uncategorically. The world I want to give Marlo is the one we are living in now, reborn. One that is nourished, healed, and flourishing. One that is courageous, compassionate, and full of grace. One that is done with the vortexes of harm's haunting, done with the celebrated parades of pain and the cyclicality of American callousness. I want to give her a world where love is a given and innocence is not a virtue to be taken. A world of her choosing, not a world already chosen. I want this for your children too, and for our universe's children, most especially for our planet Earth and her sister in solidarity, Saturn, whose big, bruising, everlasting return will forever be felt by us as long as humans are living. I want our children to grow up in unison, but each with their own individual uniquenesses, like the atoms of water in a river, unpredictable, independent, charged, and free. I can see it now. My daughter's entire life on the horizon, like a sun glaring on the glass of the ocean's surface, her waves impermanent, her salt spectacular, the body of her owning the moon's pull. I can see it now. My girl's trajectory of curiosity, kindness, and dignity vibrating alongside every other drop of human life. See them and speak to them with me now, our children and their futures. The children of our friends and family flooding with actualization, reverberating all the light we have ever relit and all the births we will ever regift. Dear Marlo, there are many different kinds of floods. There are the floods of hormones, of emotions, of memories. The flash flood, the overbank, the urban, and the coastal flood. There are flood warnings and flood watches, catastrophic floods, and the flooding of markets. There's the flood of tears, the flood of phone lines, and of course, flood insurance. There is psychotherapeutic flooding and the flooding of an engine, the biblical, the metaphysical, the metaphorical, and the astronomical. And behind every flood is a fracturing. A dam that gave out, or an ocean swell that came in, or a pipe that burst, or a mind that shattered, or a heart that cracked. Behind every flood is a cause, a consuming that can no longer be contained, a river overflowing, a volcano erupting, a collective conscious writhing, a vibrating pulse. And then there is you, young daydreamer of the deluge, pulp of precisions, torrent of radical instinct, my child, my love. Right now, your young mind is an erupting body of feral water, ready to soak up the world around you. You've been on this planet for only 2 years, but you are beginning to understand how complicated it is, equal parts cruel, unfair, and filled with joyous light. Your young power, your fresh perception, your potential will someday pierce the soft banks of your living, and you will flow into who you were meant to be, no matter the gender you arrive at, the heart you pound with, the voice you conquer the world with. My hope for you is a hope for every child who comes into this world, that you are seen by this world as not just a single flame, but as the fire that forged your own way, no matter the pain, no matter the consequence, no matter the failure. I hope you emerge true to what you want, not just true to who you are. I know that sometimes you can feel lost, because I too have felt lost. Sometimes life can make you feel like you are something received rather than reciprocated. But this I can promise. One day you will be seen and valued for the depths of your riverbed, not just the clarity of your water. For the crash of your gush, not just the speed of your tide. Your very existence is the declaration of an untamed instinct, wild and indomitable, tangled and fueled for this breaking open, this pushing through, this era and its most untamable ignition. But none of this will come without years of undoing first, without years of being undone. I will give you everything I have and everything I know as your mom, and that will still not be enough. And it might also still be wrong. I will do my best to bring you to the river's edge, but you must find your own way to float. You will have to fight and undo the ways in which you were taught by me and the world, and also fight to continue to learn on your own. You will have to undo hesitation, creative hibernation, and the casting of your furnace as a caricature to be outsourced. You will spend many moons hearing people tell you that that instinct, that this knowing, this oracle of your gut will forever be both your blessing and your greatest curse. But here is the secret, Marlowe. For women, there's no such thing as a curse. Curses are for fractured kings and clocks that forever tick backward. Curses are for the contexts of hexing, and you cannot be implicated. Your instincts will never be conquered. They will only be conjured. Come close. Be here with me now in this body that is your own, in this grown space where our shared skin is the binding of our story. One day, when you are grown and I am gone, I want you to remember this letter, this offering as a way into the flood of you and who you will become, of what you were put here on this earth to do. Remember that the anxiety you'll inevitably feel someday, the isolation you will carry, the stories you will tell, and the silence you will store is not part of some curse. It is part of your dawning, your doing, a Saturn return, a revolution inside you, a motivation to swell. This world can be tough. This world can be unkind and confused and filled with people who mean to do harm or even who don't but still do it anyway. This world may leave you feeling as lost as a locket in the ocean, as raw as a skinned heart, as withheld from yourself as I ever did. To find yourself in it, pull the pin on your instincts and detonate. Watch what collapses, what bursts, what is forced to break out. Be propelled into your journey and the journey of others, forever linking arms with the arteries of kindred hearts. Beat in cadence, a rhythm for change. because we are all just the flooding of blood into a single flow, into one solitary fuel, hoping for a pulse, one profound pounding at a time. Love, Mom. Thank you. I would love now to invite up to the stage my dear friend Cecile Richards.
That was awesome.
Hi, Cecile.
Hi, Amber. It makes me want to go back and write a letter to my daughters, even though they're grown now. That's such a great, and it's such a wonderful way to end the book.
Yeah.
The book is fantastic for any of those of you who haven't read it yet. And do you read it? Did you read it and record it? Or no?
I did. I did the audiobook, yeah,
Okay.
which was weird, but it's
It's
fine.
like, but fantastic. You're just such an incredible, like, writer, reader, everything. So
Yeah,
that must be
thank you.
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have so many questions. I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation, but then we'll open it up to those of you in the audience who want to ask Amber anything, including what it was like to be Emily Quartermain, and although who I just learned about. Anyway, she could explain that later.
I'm happy you didn't know about that.
Yeah.
That pleases me.
Embarrassing cultural ignorance. I love that you started and talked about your mom, and I just
Yeah.
let's just give it up for the moms, right?
Yeah.
Because the moms got us
Good
here.
for the moms. It ain't easy.
So I do want to go back and talk and ask you about some of the things that you've written about being a mom, because I think it's such a profound thing, and especially in this moment. But first, maybe just tell us why. So I think of women being completely lit up on fire every day in the United States right now and around the world.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what you mean when you say era of ignition, but sort of how'd you come up with the title? What does it mean to you?
So I was trying to find, I think, obviously the idea of a flame feels very universal, this idea of burning. But I was trying to find a term to encapsulate this time that I am in, which I feel so many women, but also probably men too, and non-binary people, and just people of different kinds are feeling very fueled in the world that we live in right now, and definitely feeling like post the rage that we have felt, especially over these last few years, though I think it's been a lot longer than that. What do we do next? What is the proactive next move? What do we do with that rage, with that frustration, with that sense of feeling lost and confused and in a deep state of chaos? And so I talk a lot about in the book, and I propose in the book that the chaos is good. That to not be afraid of it, because out of the chaos that we have been experiencing comes the clarity. And that is really what we need in order to uproot a lot of the bad parts of society, the foundations of our society. In order to do that, you need to have a large uprooting. It can't be done delicately. That's just not the way that it works. History has shown us that. Civil rights movements throughout American history has shown us that. If you want that kind of large-scale change. So this, to me, sort of feels like what happens after the rage, right? After that initial movement, and how everyone is sort of fueled up and ignited in their own personal way to do the work both for themselves, whether that's breaking out of the box that you have been cast in and breaking out of the mold of the narrative that you have been cast in, and being the thing that you always wanted to do, no matter how terrifying that is, or whether that's also putting yourself out in the world to make sure that our politicians are more representative of us, and making sure we're doing everything we can in politics. So the era of ignition, I feel like, is something that we are deeply steeped in right now. This feeling that you have, which is pulling you in so many different directions, but is ultimately driving you at a high speed. That's what it is. It's condensed change.
Ooh, I like that, condensed change. I think that's good. And I think it's interesting, because I feel like we have moved from this, at least what I'm hearing from folks around the country is like, okay, resisting has been okay and exhausting,
Yeah.
and to some extent it's created community, but now people want to do more than resist. Actually, now we want to actually see change and imagine the world we want, not just the world that we don't want, which is
Yeah.
kind of what we've been living in. So I think it is a really interesting moment. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask about this whole thing about being a mom, and I was with you, of course, at the Women's March.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to deliver that baby right there on the stage. I mean,
Cecile,
Amber
there's a story in the book about Cecile when I got to the Women's March was so kind when I went to the Planned Parenthood breakfast and I was like waddling out with my stomach just sticking. I was probably
you were way pregnant.
My
Yes.
doctor, who's not here tonight, my general practitioner was like, you may not go to DC. And I was like, okay. But I was on the train when I was saying, okay. I was like, no, I won't go. She's like, you cannot go. But Cecile very kindly was like, do you want to get in my car and
Yeah,
drive
right. And
over
there's
to
like
the
an
march?
8-month pregnant woman there, and I'm going to be like,
Yeah.
sorry, I got a ride. Yeah, we'll see you there. No, but it was it was such an incredible
It was wild.
day. Although I love you just told me something I didn't know, which is
Oh.
that you actually didn't quit marching.
Yeah. Well, I think I was so revved up by that time. First of all, you couldn't get out of the Women's March in DC. You couldn't go anywhere.
A march. We were just kind of like basically moving in one place, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I also felt like, I say this in the book, but I was like, if I'm gonna give birth, this is like the perfect place. There's probably like
million
50,000 doulas here. And, it's like, my water broke. It's like, okay, I'm coming. But I, getting out, I was with my friend Katie and we walked all the way to the train station. It was like close to 2 miles. We got on the train, we went back, we happened to come out of the subway in the center of the New York March. And Katie was like, I'm going home. And I was like, I'm gonna keep marching. I'll see you later. And I just got in and I met up with a friend there. It was crazy.
No, it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
The march that never ended.
Yeah. And then I had Marlowe on Fifth Avenue. That's not true.
Now that would be a good book. But I do think it's actually you wrote. I'm going to read something you wrote because it really struck home to me. Because I remember, I mean, one of the lowest points of this last year was absolutely the Brett Kavanaugh hearings.
Yeah.
And even though my 2 daughters are grown, I had to call my daughter Lily and just apologize for the world because it felt so like we haven't done right by people. So you pose a really good, important question in the book, which is, how do we encourage and support our daughters by talking to them and making them feel powerful without lying to them about the realities of the world we live in?
Yeah.
And I think that is, how do we inspire our daughters and our sons to fight for something better, but also make them aware of, not just for themselves, but for a lot of people in this country who are under assault every day under this administration or this culture. And I think that's just it's an important thing to figure out. And I think as a parent, it feels very front and center.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that there's something really, one of the most important things that is happening right now that we're all kind of gravitating to is this self-actualization, this self-realization that our particular pain or our particular marginalization, especially as a predominantly white group, right, in this room too, that there are people that are also being left out in far worse ways, whose representation should also matter. And what I'm seeing certainly in a lot of my circles is that is actually becoming a real priority now. So it's not just about me and my experience and what I'm not getting and the rooms that I'm not being allowed into, but also remembering all the other people that would never even have an opportunity to get a foot in the building, let alone the door. So I think that's one of the really important things, and to be able to say that to my kid at some point, to not give her all the terrible stuff, but to certainly make her aware, these things are going to be more difficult for you. And also just remember that while they're difficult for you, they're going to be a lot more difficult for your friends who are not white, and who are not necessarily of cisgender. So making her aware of those things, because I think one of the most important things to teach our kids is not that we're all the same and that we're all equal, because we're not. We're very different people. We're very different, and it's our differences that make us powerful. It is our individuality that makes us able to bring something to the table. And all of those individualities must be recognized and must be seen as equal. So it's seeing the differences, I think, that brings power to different types of communities and different kinds of people from different walks of life.
No, absolutely. Actually, you reminded me of something I remember just a couple years into my time at Planned Parenthood. This is an embarrassing admission, but along the same thing, Trayvon Martin was killed, and I thought, well, what can we do? And so I said, well, we'll just, folks who want to get together and talk about it, we'll just have like an hour to sit. And of course, the folks who came were mainly Black women who had children.
Yeah.
And sitting in that room, listening to them talk about how they raised their children
Yeah.
and the lessons they had to teach their children about being safe is something that, for me, I felt like it was so revelatory and so horrifying that I had never really thought about as a mother what it was like for the women I worked with every day to just keep their kids safe. And I think right now, so you being a mom now, and because sometimes it does, it just adds a whole new prism on the world. But I think I'm hearing from more and more women in particular, because that's who I've been really listening to, that the issues that are happening, family separation, LGBTQ, harassment, obviously the murders of young Black boys. These are things that are beginning to like open, I think, a lot of women's minds, and I'm sure men as well, but women are really who I've been listening to. And it just seems like this moment, and how is for you, like as a mom, I feel like we can speak to and understand and empathize and have to act on these issues, even though of course we're not ones. We don't live on the Rio Grande border. We don't. A lot of things are easy to kind of keep out of sight, out of mind.
But that's part of it. Is that it's been so easy to just go, well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't really need to. I don't need to get it. I've already got my own shit going on. Like my life is incredibly unfair and difficult and complicated and busy and frustrating, and I don't feel seen in any of these other, these given situations. But you have to be reminded that there are people literally dying and having their entire livelihoods ripped away from them at the same time, and that those people need to feel supported and amplified, and those stories need to be part of the larger context of what we're trying to change. It all has to change at the same time. It can't be enough for us to just change our individual world and our individual work. And so much of the proactive part of this book that I talk about is how to do that. Even for men, like there is a very clear and easy way for you to be able to stand with the women around you and make sure that they feel supported. It's not very hard. But I understand, because each of us, you're not raised knowing these things necessarily. You have to learn them. So I think part of the learning is really important for us, right? Failure is not the problem. Not trying is the problem. Sticking your head in the sand and saying like, I can't, it doesn't affect me, I don't need to, it's too much. Like I get to do that once in a while, but not trying to figure out how you might be part of the problem, to me is what's not acceptable. So being failing in that attempt is fine. Fail many times. We're human beings. That's who we are. That's how we learn. But the wanting curiosity, needing curiosity to know how someone else could be in pain, how another community could be in pain and possibly affected their pain by you and by your community, and having these intersectional dialogues, to me is so important about changing the foundation of everything.
Amen. So I'm going to move to the positive, because I think there's actually because I think that's what I think a lot of people are just saying like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And I think there's a number of things in here you say and talk about that I think are incredibly helpful. And one, I just loved this because of course it brought back the Kavanaugh hearings and Christine Blasey Ford. But it was like, one of the most important gifts we can give one another, regardless of gender, is the gift not only of being believed, but of being believed in.
Yeah.
Which is just like a whole, that's such a much deeper thing. And I do think that's what women now need, is to be believed in.
I think those small things that you can do, please never discount them, because sometimes if that's what you have to offer, that's enough. I'll give you a great example. Recently, we went, some of the women from the Time's Up organization, we all went and had like a day of witness at Harvey Weinstein's trial. I think it was in January, down at the criminal courthouse. And the women that we went with were survivors. Some of them were survivors of Harvey. Some of them were survivors of Bill Cosby. Some of them were survivors of other individuals. It wasn't a big thing. We just went together. We all wore Time's Up shirts under our jackets. We were told not to show those in the courthouse out of respect for the court and the judge, so we didn't. We closed our jackets, but we were wearing them. And we went in and we sat in this room, and everyone felt really nervous and scared. And we just sat there in silent witness, and he felt us there. I mean, he knew we were there, and when he came back down this aisle, he stared at all of us, and then he looked at Jodi Kantor for a very long time, and then he just kept going out of the room. But and when we left, we were on fire. We felt so empowered by that moment. Some of the women I went with who were like, I have struggled for years in therapy trying to deal with what happened to me, my trauma. And this did more for me in one moment. Just saying, I'm gonna go and be a silent witness for the other women we invited who were like, I physically cannot be in the same room with that person. And we said, we're gonna go for you. So sometimes even just showing up in a literal way like that can speak volumes. It can mean so much.
No, that's really powerful. And something else you talk about, and I don't think it's your initiative, but it's the +1 initiative, which I think is awesome and everyone can do. So do you want to say what that is?
Yeah, so one of the great things that came out of the formation of Time's Up, many different women had many different ideas in the beginning, right? We were all just getting in these rooms together in New York and Los Angeles predominantly, and just expressing the things that made us angry and felt, expressing the inequality, whether that was pay inequality or having zero representation in being writers, directors, producers, anything on that level. But one of the things that came out of it was this thing called the +1 initiative, which basically means remember what you have to offer in this world, whether you are a physician or, a representative or even just a veterinarian, I don't know, whatever it is that you do, you have something to offer someone else who has never been able to do that work before, who would not know anything about that, and who would love to maybe come be with you for today to see what your work was like if they were interested in getting into that field. So this idea of the +1, I talk about in the book how long I've taken for granted all the shallow, kind of vapid Hollywood parties that I get invited to, whether it's an award season party or whatever. I never go to them. Actors don't ever go to them unless you are nominated. It's kind of like a gripey actory thing. But thinking about it, there is many people, many friends of mine who would love to go in there and have me introduce them to Genji Cohen, even if you're just rubbing shoulders with her, or meet a Ted Sarandos or somebody like that. This idea of having somebody bring you into a room and then you get to see what those rooms are like. When I actually went in to pitch this book at different publishing houses, my literary agent, Anthony Matero, he was so inspired after reading it and this idea about the +1 initiative that he asked if his assistant, Alex, could come into the pitches. I think she's an aspiring writer. And I was like, absolutely. So now Alex, who's come into these pitches, sees how a pitch goes. That's half the battle for a lot of women, is even figuring out, how do I do it? How do I go in? I don't even know step 1 of how to do that. And it really is something that predominantly men who have been in positions of power, especially in the entertainment business, take for granted because it's kind of par for the course and it's something that's passed down to you. I'm not saying you're not nervous when you go in and do that work. I'm just saying we have had no access to those rooms, to even know how to go into those rooms and be taken seriously. So think about that in your own professions and the work that you do. For me, I was like, I'm not a super famous A-list movie actress. I can't do anything. But that's actually just not true. All of us, no matter who we are, have something to offer to someone.
Well, it's like your example too of going to the hearing, or going to the courthouse. I think also in this moment of a lot of folks are going, I need to do more. I've never gone to a march. I've never done anything. Mm-hmm. But just bringing someone along and saying, just go with me. It just demystifies the world. It's one of the things I love about AOC is just demystifying how some things work, like Congress. And I think the more that we can expose and bring people along with this is really, it's a powerful part of this moment.
I feel like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing this in this really interesting way on Instagram stories. So I'm kind of obsessed with watching her, but
absolutely.
she's showing how the entire political system works. And she's also showing how she's so exhausted at the end of the day that she's like, I'm gonna go home and cook, but whatever. I love watching her because I have no idea. If I ever wanted to run for public office, I would like go back and look at her Instagram stories because she shows you so much of how everything works, just like the day-to-day simple things that you would know nothing about. And that preparation, that mental preparation is worth everything.
So I'm going to ask one other question, and then I want to make sure that we, I have a lot of things we could talk about, but you talk a lot in the book about men and the opportunity for men to be part of this era of ignition. And I think that it's really important. I loved what Wade Davis, who's just so amazing, for those of you who don't know him, he's really such a just incredibly thoughtful guy about the role of men. And he writes, on men, you write, if ignorance can be a learned behavior, then so too can be illumination, which I love that. And Wade Davis says, here's what men don't get about the Me Too movement. It's not about women, it's about us. Women are laying themselves bare for us to wake up. And so, again, I think we're in this moment where there's an opportunity not just to call men out, but call them in. And
yes,
anyway,
I'm
you might have
very
a
much with that,
couple
yeah.
of, you write really personally about how you have taken this on yourself.
Yeah, I think all of us have the capacity to create this illumination, especially, for friends of ours or partners of ours that are having tougher times with understanding some of that or feeling like they need to push back. I feel like the enemy of all of this shift is defensiveness. And I understand the need immediately for all of us to like jump to the defense and say, well, that's not true about me. That can't possibly be true. But I think it's important for us to remember that none of the work can be done without men, without their participation. And again, to just remember that it's all learning. Like, I had to learn. I didn't come out of my mother's womb like this. This is not how I grew up. This took me years and years and years to understand anything about what I valued and where my morals stood and what mattered to me. And I think it's important to honor other people's journeys in that process and to make sure that you are constantly bringing them with you, but also not to excuse them and not to let them have excuses. That's really important. I think the learning and the movement of the learning is the most important thing that we can do in any partnership, whether, again, that's like a private one or a public one, a professional one, is to do the most that we can with what we've been given and what we've learned based on what other people have had to teach us. That is human nature. But the not learning, the staying where we are, the defensiveness, that's gotta go. That's been the way it's been forever, and we can't do that anymore, especially under this presidency. It's gotta go.
Yeah, and I think the important thing, too, that I would just add to that is, things weren't that great before Donald Trump for a lot of people in this country, and so this is an opportunity to actually aspire to something better than just before.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, but I'm not gonna ask. I'm gonna let folks in the audience. I think you just get to stand up and wave your hand, and I'll call on you if you want to ask Amber something. You're pointing at somebody. Oh, or if you could actually step to the mic. There's a microphone. Oh, that's a microphone. I thought it was a camera.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have a question.
If you have a question, does anyone
If you also don't feel like walking up to a microphone and you just want to stand up and shout out a question, we're fine with that too.
That also works.
Yeah. And if you don't have a question, I have a million more. But anybody, this is your chance. Amber Tamblyn.
I will lock this
is
fucking door and you will sit here.
I have a question.
Each of you.
I have a question.
Okay,
Yes.
Nick has a question.
What is your next literary endeavor?
Oh, God.
Yeah. Can you talk
Thank you,
about
Nick,
it?
from the Strand.
Yeah, I know. I feel like all of my amazing healers here are like, she's not writing. She's going to rest her arms and her back and her neck and her head and her body. I'm working on my second feature film. That's what I'm doing.
All
doing
right.
that. I got into the Sundance Labs, and so I'm going to... Sundance too. I'm gonna go do that.
Well, so that's so I'll just ask this question until someone stands up at the mic, because the other thing you write about in the book is getting your film made.
Yeah.
And the the whole process of trying and finally getting it made, and even documenting that the statistics
Oh, yeah.
of women, why that we're not crazy.
Yeah.
It's not that it just seems like we don't get an even chance. We don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole idea of this sort of gaslighting that a lot of women feel like we're going through, and why things like the march and other collective action have been important for women to feel like they're part of something bigger, and that this isn't just, it's not just them. So I don't know if you have anything you want to say about that chapter, but I thought it was just fascinating. And your just doggedness that, by God, you're going to get this film made. And,
Yeah,
you know, no matter how many rejections you had. It was really inspiring.
Yeah, and I don't think, by the way, I don't think that that's not something that men also go through, that male filmmakers. I know it's tough. In this particular case, I hired I'll just tell you briefly, I hired a statistician after this company rejected the film, and I basically had the statistician go through all the movies that they had ever put out and break it down according to how many of them were male writer-directors, whether or not they had a Academy Award, a two-time Academy Award nomination, or either one, lead actress, if they had the same percentile that I had of my film on Rotten Tomatoes, which was 96% at that time, if they had had the reviews, if they had had the pre-existing clout and ability to get publicity in the way that I do with a long tenure in the acting business. Basically, like, went through and stripped down and looked at all of their movies. What festivals did they get into? What was their budget? All of these things. And we ended up finding out that there was like a 93% chance that if I was a man and over the age of 50, they would have bought the film. And I presented them with this lovingly. And they were so gracious, and they turned it down again.
But it was great because just actually being able to document the things which I think there are more women, you know, being able to write, being able to actually tell the stories. It was really inspiring.
Yeah.
But it looks like we have a question. So.
Hi.
You can just pull it down.
I don't want to break it. Thank you. Obviously, writing for movies and writing a book is completely different, but it obviously all comes from you. So how often do you find that your ideas and inspiration for the both cross over?
It's a great question. So the question is about writing, and how often do I see writing, you know, feature work or anything like that compared to writing novels or books, and where do they cross over? I feel like they're all kind of inextricably linked, though I will say that I think that my heart lies forever in poetry, and everything of me is rooted in poetry. It starts there. That is the beginning point of it. It informs everything I do. I think poetry informs my acting. It informs my activism to a certain degree, my fiction, certainly my nonfiction. The pieces that I read tonight were very informed by poetry. So I think that's the center of everything. And if you get to see Painted Black, which I believe is still on Netflix, it's a poem. It's a visual poem for sure. So thank you for your question.
Hi, Amber, Rebecca.
Hi.
I just want to say I love Joan of Arcadia. That was like one of my favorite, like throwing it all the way back.
Love it.
I was just wondering, just curious, how did that show change your approach to religion, spirituality? Did you come in and like with one perspective and then leave it going, oh my God, I understand so much more now, or anything like that?
So one of the great things about Joan of Arcadia was that it was very non-denominational, and it was across all different kinds of beliefs and religion, which was really beautiful. I think it's so interesting. People always ask me, because I've done a lot of horror films too, like The Ring and all these movies, and they're like, when you were shooting The Ring, were you absolutely terrified? And I was like, no, I was like sitting in a chair like this for 6 hours, like waiting for a take, and then you go and you're like, ah! And then you go sit and you're like reading your book again. So I only say that to say that while I know the show was very inspirational for many people who watched it, I think my experience making it was not so much, although I will say Barbara Hall was such an extraordinary show creator and writer, and somebody who I love so much. She does the show Madam Secretary now, and certainly I think her way of bringing people into the spiritual world and into, you know, believing in magic almost, and being able to manifest our own faith through some of those things. She had a really unique quality and ability to do that with her writing.
Thank you so much for just coming out and doing
Yeah,
this. We
of
totally
course.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Gia.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
First of all, Ann Richards forever and ever and ever.
She's shining down on us somehow.
Seriously,
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my question.
Okay.
In our actor circles of friends, we have been talking a lot about art, especially in the wake of Me Too, and art that has come out of people that have done some not great things. And like, what do we do with that art? And there's a lot of people that say, you know, I'm never gonna watch another Woody Allen movie again, forget it. I'm done with Woody Allen, which I understand.
Yeah.
But I also really love Annie Hall. I love that film.
Yeah.
It makes me really, so I'm just curious, and please weigh in on this too, and how you feel. What do we do with this art?
Well, we can't get rid of it.
Right.
I mean, it's there. It's art. To me, I think what's most important about this. No, I just leave them. They're so scratched up and dirty. It's my reading glasses is terrible. I think what's most important just to remember now is, bless you. I think what's most important to remember is just having the frame of the context. To me, that's what matters. And then each of us gets to make our own individual choices. You know, for me, there are certain forms of art and artists that I'm just really not interested in anymore. The music of R. Kelly, for instance. That's something I've not liked for a long time, though I used to love it. But there are some things I think that overshadow the art so much in our understanding of it now. And that's, I think, an individual choice for each and every one of us.
Sure.
I think there's no way to say, like, we are going to ban art, we're going to get rid of this. You can't do that.
No.
And Woody Allen has made some really incredible films. So that's for each and every one of us, I think, to enjoy, but to always remember the context. Like, I know for me, and I know my poor husband is probably in the back, like, please don't do that to our daughter. But I feel like it's important when she gets older, of the right age, to let her know who the filmmaker is. If
Sure.
they are a person that is problematic in that way, and to say, here's some of the context behind this particular filmmaker, behind this particular person. I think that there's nothing wrong with all of us accumulating more knowledge and knowing more. I think that's really good. And then I think it's up to individual people. And some people might feel that way. They might just say, I'll never watch a Woody Allen movie again. And you know what? That's totally their prerogative. Yeah.
And I think the only thing, bravo, I think that's right. And then I think what we just have to do is fight for the day when half of the films are made by women.
Yeah.
And then we will have different perspectives in this
Yeah.
country. Because I think that's the real problem is, you know, 3/4 of the people reporting now on politics are men. So is it any wonder we're going through another cycle where, you know, so I just think it's just having equality of representation of race, of gender, of perspective will improve art. But
I always find myself too, and I'm sure all of you have experienced this to a certain degree, but constantly in arguments with friends, with men who are friends, and people who want to push against this idea, and they want to ask those questions, and certainly conversations of redemption, and like, well, this person's amazing. Why can't they come back and do the work that they were doing before? And I feel very much with Cecile, I've been asked this in interviews this week too, of like, I want to pivot away from that conversation, and I want to look at all the amazing things that women are doing. For instance, Gia runs a company, a women's production company with her friend, and they create films. Is it just by women, or what is the context of the company?
Well, with women who bring us ideas.
Yeah, there you
Doesn't matter
go.
where they come from.
Yeah. And this is a fairly new company that you
Yeah.
created, right? So
Yeah.
like, this came out of, Gia was like, I'm assuming you're like, I don't want to just do this one thing anymore. It's not fulfilling to me, and I know that I have the capacity to do more. And you did it, and here we are. And I think that those are the things to me that are so important to keep looking at, because the redemption conversation is not for us. It's for the person who needs to atone, in my opinion. So,
Great.
yeah.
In the Meantime Productions.
In the Meantime Productions,
Nice.
that's
Yeah.
Gia's company.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks.
thank you, Gia. I think we have like time for one more question.
Hi.
Oh, or if you're there too.
Yes,
Okay, we'll make them quick.
we'll do you
Great.
too. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Amber, in your piece about an abusive ex, you mentioned how supportive and validating your husband David is and was. In the past, I found myself making myself smaller
Yeah.
to please men and to not appear threatening. So my question is, how do you procure love without compromising your self-worth and feminist identity?
Whoo, girl.
That's volume 2. That's volume 2.
We're getting real in here tonight. I think at some level there always will be compromise. There kind of has to be. I think that the intersection of compromise and learning must be met in order for there to be some kind of change. And sometimes that just means two people need to figure out how to see eye to eye, and that's not so easy. But I do think my husband has been incredibly supportive through everything, and certainly through the retelling of these stories as well in this book, and stories that pertain to me and a lot of violence that I went through when I was younger. And I think it's important to try as much as we can to surround ourselves with those types of individuals and to always keep going back to our own instinct. That's sort of like the lesson plan that I keep saying to Marlo, because I quote a friend in the book where I say that women are sort of taught to confuse their instincts for anxiety. And so much I know of my physical issues have literally manifested as like central nervous problems because of so much that I have absorbed in the 25 years that I've been acting and been telling myself that I'm only capable of doing one thing, that I'm only ever capable of being this particular type of object. And if I'm not that object, then I don't exist. Of always sort of just being a guest in my own life as opposed to a member of it in that way. So keep that in mind, and always just remember to check in with your own instincts. And if you feel like you're not very connected with them, then just keep returning to that work, because eventually that voice will outweigh all the noise. And that's what you want. You want to go towards the voice, not the noise.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, so I recently stumbled upon a piece. It actually came out right after the election, and I believe it was Sally Krawcheck who posted it. The headline was why Trump being elected would be the best thing that happened for women or the women's movement. And she got
Did Susan Sarandon write it?
No, yeah. I think she got quite a bit of backlash on it, but I think shifting from individuality to grouping together. Do both of you guys agree with that? And what kind of do you see next for this era of ignition?
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, it was definitely not the best thing that's ever happened to women.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, maybe I could, something also I wanted to add, because I think we are at this interesting moment now, not just the last 2 years, but now we have a record number of women running for president. I mean, it's extraordinary, and maybe that wouldn't have happened if Hillary hadn't run, and I know you spent a lot of time on the road for her, so you have a lot of firsthand experience, and a lot of it in the book, which I just want to keep touting, because I think there's just so many stories in here that actually help, that do deal with a lot of the sort of pain and anguish that women have felt. So even though I don't believe that Donald Trump getting elected was the best thing that ever happened to women, I think women are, as usual, doing their dead level best to change the world despite it. And so I think, again, we're taking this moment, and I hope looking beyond simply changing who's in the White House, but instead actually focusing on what if we could just actually build the world that we want to live in, where there was full equality for everyone.
Yeah.
And that to me is, if there is a hopeful sign, it's that we're able to think past one election cycle to the next, and actually about the kind of future we want to have. So
yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think before I was kind of dreading the 2020 election. I'm still kind of dreading it a little bit, but I'm not now, and I'm feeling I've given in, and I've given myself away to the fear, and I've given in to I've told myself it's okay. It's okay for all of us to feel terrified when we're jumping into all of this, and we don't know what we're doing, and we don't know where anything is going to land or how things are going to land. But I don't think that it's by coincidence that the first several candidates who announced their their run for president were women. I don't think that's a coincidence. It's obviously unprecedented. And to me, what's so wonderful about seeing the living embodiment of that change, to see the physical, literal embodiment of that change, is that now, like Cecile said, now we have real options. Now we can talk about all the other things. Now I want to talk about, all the platforms, and I want to talk about policies, and those things now. Because there are options, I feel like I have more room to be able to go and choose. And I think that, especially for any of us here that are liberal and democratic and on that side of things, we're in good shape as far as who we have running, including Bernie Sanders. And I've said this time and time again, if he wins the Democratic nomination, I will 100% support him and vote for him, and all of you should too. Because I think that unifying is something that we can and we must get around and get together on.
He might not be the nominee, though.
He might not.
Yeah.
He's not my first choice. But he's great.
Comment? Not
Yes.
a question, just a quick comment.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for, I know this book, I haven't read it, I'm looking forward to read it, but thank
You
you
have
for
a
Any
pin!
Man.
You're a
Oh, you're wearing
Yes.
a pin. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to thank you for Any Man. It made me think,
Oh.
and it made me inspired. I grew up with 3 brothers,
Ah.
with a strong mother, but now I have a house full of women, 3 daughters, 4 granddaughters. So it helped me
set.
think of
God bless you. God bless you, sir. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. Thank you to Cecile Richards, my friend, my dear friend. And I'm going to be here signing books, so please come say hi. We'll move it along. I'll take some pictures, whatever you guys want. Thank you.